Michael Wilson joins us from London. Great to have you, Michael. Good to see you again. Missed you.
Morning, thank you. Yeah, good to see you too. Now, Hong Kong down a little bit this morning. Generally, Asian markets down, carrying on from Wall Street last night. Hong Kong's Hang Seng, though, leading shares downwards. These are Chinese stocks, which are Chinese tech stocks, which are actually on the Hong Kong market. New export rules from the United States. This applies to China's largest chip maker, Semiconductor Corporation, and Hua Hong Semiconductor, and Shanghai Fudan Micro Electronics. Some of those actually plunging quite a lot. The whole of the Hang Seng index down about 2.49. Shanghai lost very, very slightly indeed. Asia Pacific shares outside Japan traded 1.46% lower. And South Korea, Taiwan and Malaysia all closed for public holidays today. Tesla is doing quite well in China. It's selling a record amount. Over 83,000 China-made vehicles entered the wholesale market. That's a 9% increase, an 8% increase, as opposed to a 5% increase from other China manufacturers of electric vehicles onto the wholesale market. So this is basically about the Shanghai factory of Tesla making a lot of money and actually upping its production, given the fact that it's been through lockdowns as well. I'm going to take you across to the United States for a brief recap there. The week is beginning with a fall in the futures market. It was a big week last week. Obviously, well, actually, do you know what I'm saying? Obviously, I didn't think it was that obvious, but it was taken that the jobs figures on Friday meant that the Fed would continue to tighten quite aggressively. I don't know, do you? I mean, I would have thought that if there were going to be a load more jobs created in the economy, then that would give the Fed the green light to increase interest rates further. But there weren't really. It was more or less level. I know there was a slight difference in the figures, but I have to say I'm mystified by the reaction to it. But won't be mystified by Friday, because on them we got JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley and Citi all reporting on Friday, and the market is bracing itself for big losses as far as those banks are concerned, wondering how they're going to be dealing. We were talking about Credit Suisse, weren't we, last week, wondering how they're going to be dealing with an increase in interest rates. Not that the banks worry about that too much, but some of the bank's customers might be worried in terms of things getting more expensive, and also OPEC Plus rattling investors with their cut in production. But over the weekend, there was confusion and actually an unbelievable amount of misdirection as far as the railways in northern Germany were concerned. The German police are now wondering whether this is actually state-sponsored sabotage by guess whom. We're not exactly sure about that, but this was actually quite serious as far as they were concerned. The week begins. I think as far as the UK is concerned, the Bank of England is going to obviously be withdrawing its support. It didn't spend the £65 billion it was promised that it might do to kind of stabilise the markets. Only spent £5 billion, but this morning announced, just to calm the markets even further, if necessary, they will set their limit at £10 billion pounds a day for actually buying distressed bonds. But we'll see about that. But I think it's pretty obvious that what they're doing is trying to prop up sterling. It has continued to slightly recover. It's now being seen as a dollar story or dollar strength rather than sterling weakness. GDP and wage figures in the UK later in the week. UK renewable companies are warning that if there is a revenue cap, it will affect their own investment in renewables. The UK is working on an energy cap on wholesale energy companies. Legislation is expected this week. This is part of a submission to say, go easy on us, please. UK postal workers this week are voting, or at least meeting the management to talk about strikes. You have to wonder whether, given we love our local postmen, as I'm sure villages do, and certainly they work very well in London. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of of the parcel post has been taken away from them by the likes of Amazon and by the likes of deliveries that were not happening during the COVID strike. Or over 115,000 postal workers may be on strike leading up to Christmas, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and all the rest of it. We'll see how those talks actually transpire. Just as the government is beginning to discuss its economic crime and corporate transparency bill, it apparently appears that 1,400, there's more than that, 14,000 UK companies, which are called LLPs, limited companies, could be, remember the could be fronts for corruption and crime. They quote an example of 950 of these suspect firms, all from one address in Cardiff. You have to wonder, don't you? UK London retailers are warning from the West End that they're facing a bit of a slowdown in the Christmas rush, which, believe it or not, is beginning now. And therefore, the market's much more dependent on overseas customers coming over and taking advantage of VAT-free shopping. And finally, as far as oil's concerned, are we approaching that $100 a barrel on the oil market? Possibly. The market is still mulling what OPEC said about those production cuts last week, and also US inflation figures, which are out later this week. So a lot to think about this week. A lot of economic information and a lot of corporate information, particularly from the United States. That's the global view this morning.
Right, Michael. Real quickly, let's go back to the UK. What game now is the Bank of England playing? At first, they said they earmarked 65 billion. Now they're claiming they spent only 5 billion out of that money, which a lot of people are saying, show us the records. We can contest that. Show us the records that you spent that amount, or you spent more than that. Now they're saying they'll shore up the pound sterling with 10 billion every week. All of that announcement is because of the decision made by Liz Truss and Kwesi Kwarteng to fulfill a campaign promise that was very populist and it didn't make sense on paper. What is going on here? I hear Kwesi Kwarteng had been meeting the bank for a while now. They've been having meetings. What's the resolution like? And finally, they've been able to cut back on this, their 45p threshold. What's the impact of that, going back on that? It's cost the economy money already. And this is the part that we're sweeping under the carpet.
If I were a central bank governor, I wouldn't be talking about currency rates. I wouldn't be talking about much of the detail, but I think it's felt, again, I say it's felt, not me, it is felt by the market that the Bank of England did, given the big unfunded gap in what was proposed in that mini budget, which is another question altogether, and the OBR will be checking the government's homework before they actually give those fiscal promises, and it will be before November the 23rd. My guess is it'll be well before the end of this month too. But given all that, what the Bank of England is simply saying is, and the markets actually quite liked this morning, what they're saying is, as you know, quite rightly say, last week they were saying there is $65 billion, £1 billion rather, available. What they're saying is they only spent 5 billion of that. And I mean, this will be noted by the banks. The banks are going through this detail, as you quite rightly say, as we speak, I would imagine. What the bank is saying this morning is they will make a further £10 billion available per day if necessary. In other words, what they're saying is, it's a bit like, forming the defence after the first goal's gone in. They're saying that, right, they're forming this now. I mean, this is the bank speaking, not me. The bank is actually saying, if this is available, they don't actually think it's necessary. And the incredible thing is, now this is something which I haven't got my head around yet, I have to say, because this only was being talked about at the weekend, and this will only become apparent as the week goes on. But an economist whom I very deeply respect, Douglas McWilliams, was saying over the weekend that actually the government's in not as bad a shape as far as finances are concerned as Kwasi Kwarteng had actually thought when he delivered that quick mini budget. Mini is the wrong word, but we'll call it a mini budget, which is over a fortnight ago. So they had to do something quickly, but the UK may not be in as bad a shape as people actually think. Again, this is ongoing research, which is going on at the moment. This is the danger of taking these flash these flash pics, day by day, particularly as far as the Bank of England is concerned. But you're right, the banks will be going through and working out whether or not the Bank of England did just spend that £5 billion or not. And this will be something which will be revealed in the next couple of days, no doubt.
Okay, still in the UK. Last week, the National Grid said that, Britain, the people should prepare for 3 hours of power cut at a time during winter. And both the National Grid and Ofgem, a regulator, they've been doing some campaigns just to put the people on notice. But Nadim Mr. Sahawi, is saying, no, it's very unlikely. And Downing Street is saying, they have faith in the measures that they're going to apply, including lifting the moratorium on fracking, focusing more on renewables, renewable energy. So who should we believe here? The National Grid or Mr. Zahawi and his colleagues in government? That's one. Number two, the U.S. Commerce Department has come up with new measures against China again. In this, they are continuing arms race. They don't want chips to be sold to the Chinese. And American companies involved in that space are also having to pay a price. So it's been suggested that international collaboration would help. Are they likely to get that international collaboration? Will other countries, the Western allies, will they queue up as expected, as is being asked, behind the United States in that regard?
They may well queue up. I believe that the way to deal with China, there's no question about where China wants to go. And remember, they do have this big symposium happening later in the month where President Xi will probably reiterate his desire to be a lifelong president. But before we get too excited about China, I would still maintain they will be facing big demographic problems in the years. The ratio of workers to people actually retiring is increasing in the same way as it is in I don't know so much about Africa, but certainly as far as Europe and the UK is concerned, they're facing the same kind of demographic problems there. So the way is not to be bombastic with nations. The way is to rub shoulders on trade, and this is what I think is happening here. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just trying to see how it would happen. It's not warlike. What it's saying is, if you want to compete, then you can compete. You can compete with the markets. They still have to sell their microprocessors somewhere. I suspect they're probably quite far behind in the technology of it as we speak at the moment, which is not demonstrated in the UK, Europe, or the United States, which are relatively quite far ahead on what I was talking about last week, which is getting this nano size of microprocessor down to where you can actually attach some of them to the side of an atom. That's what we're talking about right now. That's where the technology is going. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. As far as the National Grid is concerned, it was made, all right, they come out with the warnings. Journalists like myself searching for headlines would have said that the National Grid says that there will be, or there could be. Could is a terrible word. You will know, because you work with journalists, what could means. It could usually means it won't, but it could. It could be. All that National Grid was doing was painting a sort of worst case scenario picture. The only person to listen to amid a crisis is your mother or your grandmother. Here's how it goes. If it gets cold, put another jumper on. If it gets too warm, walk outside and walk around a bit. These are things. There can be household savings. I don't need, and our generation does not need people tell us. And if it's got to be cutting off for 3 hours during the day, we cut off for 3 hours during the day. We came through the first energy crisis in the 1970s. Europe will come through this one as well. The big danger about this is the likes of Germany, which can afford. I mean, I'm talking about the EU now, not about the UK. I'm talking about the EU and Germany, for example, using its financial muscle to say, oh yes, we'll give a subsidy to all our people. Whereas the likes of Spain, Italy, and certainly parts of southern France and other smaller nations within the EU cannot afford to do that. That's what you're seeing at the moment. So the National Grid stuff is a warning of what could happen. I don't like could. I much prefer to it will, and we're not getting that from the National Grid right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. It's now time for Business on the African Continent. Rutus, how's it going? Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, Rufai. Happy holidays, Doctor. Happy holidays to all our viewers out there. We begin with fuel subsidies. Eid al-Malud. We begin with fuel subsidies. Apparently, of course, we saw the President Buhari present the budget, 2023 budget on Friday to the National Assembly. 20 trillion naira, about a 10.78 trillion deficit. Now, there are some senators, though, that are opposed to fuel subsidies being removed in June of next year. They want it extended to December. Here's one of them that spoke to journalists, quoted in today's This Day newspaper edition. Let's take a look at this quote from a senator from, I think it's Enugu North. Yes, Enugu North Senator. The executive has proposed that the oil subsidy would end at the end of May next year. For us in the Senate, we argue that it's better to make this 1 year. We have said it will end in December next year. This is because we don't want it to create a problem for the government that would succeed President Buhari. We don't want Nigerians to start attacking the new government from there on. This is a remarkable statement. He's a PDP senator from the Enugu North Senatorial District. There's so much to take away from this statement. How does he know that Nigerians will attack the next government? I'm going to mention data and polls twice today. Have we done proper polls asking Nigerians how they feel about fuel subsidies and whether or not it should be removed in May or in December of next year? There's also the issue of cost. If you take, as Zainab Ahmed presented to the National Assembly, if you take subsidies all the way to the end of the year, you are looking at about a 12 trillion naira deficit, which is a substantial chunk of the 20 trillion naira budget. So, not sure if the senator is taking all of that into account, but again, remarkable statement from him. We move to aviation. They just concluded in Dubai a airline economics growth frontiers Middle East and Africa conference where they talked about the aviation industry. Interesting data that just came out. Lagos is not part of the top 10 most lucrative routes in Africa. If you take a look at the chart, and we extracted this from the conference. Johannesburg, Dubai is number one. You have the revenue on the right-hand side, 315 million. Johannesburg, London, through British Airways. Cairo, Jeddah, Saudi Arabian. Luanda, Lisbon, TAG and Angola Airlines. Cape Town, Johannesburg. Cairo, Dubai, Emirates. Cape Town, Dubai, Emirates, Abidjan, Paris, France, Cape Town, London, and then Mauritius and Dubai, Emirates. And this is from 2019. For the proponents of Nigerian Air that say that this will allow the Lagos to be a hub and would be a transit route for millions of passengers, at least for 2019, the numbers do not support it. Now, as it would be interesting to see what the numbers from 2021 look like. You know how COVID devastated the airline aviation industry, but I would hazard a guess that if this is pre-pandemic, less people traveling due to the cost now of tickets and so on, that those figures are much less. So, again, data. For those who say, Lagos-London routes is a big lucrative route. Lagos-Dubai. The numbers do not support that. Let's talk insecurity here. There's a viral TikTok video we saw from the United States. A nurse who stopped what she calls an attempted kidnapping. Let's take a listen.
So let me tell y'all how I almost got kidnapped at Walmart a couple days ago. So I'm a real early morning person. I like to get up at like 5 a.m. and do the things I needed to do. Now, this day I needed to go to Walmart because I needed to go grab a quick little outfit for my daughter because it was picture day. So I drove down to Walmart. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning. So when I pull into the parking lot, I see a white van sitting at the other end of the parking lot. So I'm like, all right, cool. I kind of park far away from them. So I go into Walmart. I'm walking around. I'm grabbing my stuff. And I notice a lady is constantly following behind me, mostly the aisles and stuff where I go to. So I keep my eye on her, but I continue to shop. So after I'm done shopping, I go to the self-checkout and I see her walk out the door. She didn't grab anything. She didn't do anything. She just walked straight out the door. All right, cool. So I go to walk out to my car and I see the van is about 4 or 5 spaces from where I park now. So I look and I start walking towards my car. And then I see the door of the van kind of start cracking open. So I stopped. And I look at the van. And then I pull her out of my waist. It is 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going anywhere without her. I already don't go anywhere without her during the day. But I dang sure ain't going nowhere at 6 a.m. without her. So I cocked it. And I looked at him. And I stood there. What y'all trying to do? Because I have no problem spraying up y'all van. So the van turns on and they pull off. It's my life or yours. And I have no problem going to your funeral. So ladies, I'm saying this to say, y'all need to get licensed and registered. Because these people is really out here trying to take us.
That's in the United States where they have better security. And when she turns the camera and says, so I pulled this out of my waist, she actually pointed her phone towards a handgun. If you look at this report from the NSSF, which is in the United States, the Trade Industry Firearms Association, they put out a report recently about the economic impact of the firearm and ammunition industry, just on the business side of this. No need to get into the report, but as far as job creation, as far as taxes and so on and so forth, the numbers are there to support it. With respect to protecting ourselves, again, the needle has not moved on insecurity and how or whether how Nigerians feel about self-defense. There's I think it was September or so, Governor Keredolu was fuming at the federal government because they denied Amoteco a firearms license. So there's still, and this is the second time I'm going to reference polls. How do Nigerians feel about the security apparatus in the nation and self-defense? Do a majority or a minority of Nigerians feel that they should be able to protect themselves? And that video from the US with a young lady who is armed, telling ladies to get licensed and get registered, was essentially calling for them to protect themselves. So this is a conversation that just spans, that goes beyond this. Finally, just a little bit of humor. Ikeja Electric Customer Service Week, their CEO put out a tweet here. This young man says, "Is your CEO single?" And then Ikeja Electric, they deleted the tweet, but they said, just in local parlance, thank you for contacting Electric. Thank you for contacting Ikeja Electric. Kindly hang your cloth where your hand will reach so you don't go collect, which is essentially telling him to cut his coats according to his size.
Yeah, because he will truly collect, honestly.
But they deleted the tweet though.
Let me start with aviation.
Aviation, yes.
Note, because, I'm sure Tom may be a married woman.
She is a married woman.
Yes,
I know her very well. She is married with children.
She's married.
And her children are not that person's mates.
And you go and be asking suspicious questions. Yes, you may end up collecting.
She is happily married.
Anyway, let me start with aviation.
Yeah.
Now, pre-pandemic, aviation was booming and all that. Then the pandemic, affected that sector heavily. And now in recent times, you've seen, increased consumer demand. We're seeing economic recovery within that particular sector. So I'm not surprised that we're having all of these conferences. Before this one that you are reporting on in Dubai, there was another one in September.
Yes.
IATA is also organizing another one, later this month.
Yeah.
And some of the issues they talked about is safety, profitability, how do you reposition for the future and all of that. But here, you're talking about the routes. You are surprised that Nigeria is not there. Well, many of these destinations of preference, Johannesburg, London, Cape Town, Paris, these are places that attract tourism. Because it's about, people going to those countries.
Yeah.
Japan, for example, now is encouraging people to come.
Yeah.
And they are even saying, even Hong Kong, they say, come to Hong Kong. We are relaxing COVID restrictions. In fact, we'll give out free tickets. Yeah. And you can be sure people will go to those destinations. Who wants to come to Lagos? That is the question. I don't want us to put down Nigeria, but Nigeria is not one of the top tourist destinations in the world. Yeah. So even when people come here, they come for a different purpose, not the same way people go to Dubai. All those conferences that I have listed, all those conferences on aviation, they are taking place in Dubai because both Dubai and Abu Dhabi have become very, dominant global, aviation spots. Yeah. And so nobody should be surprised that they come there. Who would prefer Lagos to Dubai, for example? So that's the kind of question that we can raise in that regard. And what we just need to do, remind ourselves of, is that this kind of information, should tell us that there's still a lot more that we need to do.
Yeah.
As for subsidy, Well, I know the preference is that subsidy should be removed. It is not sustainable. I mean, there's so much information in that regard. Now, but you will recall when the Minister of Finance and Budget Planning, Mrs. Ahmed, presented the MTEP FSP, the medium-term expenditure framework, and the fiscal strategy paper, she made it very clear. She painted possible scenarios, which we may just summarize very quickly. That look, if you have a whole year subsidy next year for petroleum, then there will be no capital project.
Right.
Second scenario, if you cut it off at the end of May, half of the year, which will cost about 3.6 trillion. Yeah. So that after that, then you will have something left to do capital projects. So it's a question of choice, in terms of what Nigeria wants to do next year. Now, the Joint National Assembly Committee on Finance, they were even saying that 3.6 trillion that is being proposed as, fuel subsidy is too high. The House of Reps accepted the figure, but the Senate committee cut it down to 1.7. But when the president presented, it's still high. A budget that has a deficit of 11.6 trillion. Okay, so we have that problem. That's one leg of it. It's about hard-headed decision, hard thinking, doing what you need to do. But I don't think you should just throw away the point by the politician that you quoted, who said, and other members of the Senate, who said that no, if you remove by May, it will mean that the next administration, right from day one, will face the crisis of removal of subsidy. And the senators, including Utazi, they are recommending that, okay, maybe the subsidy should go all the way down till December. Well, it looks like common sense. The Buhari administration could not remove the subsidy because, as the president himself pointed out in an interview with, in a piece, in a comment with Bloomberg, the president said, well, he understands the fact that subsidy must go, but how about the consequences? It may well be what that Senator Utazi is referring to, that it will mean that right from day one is the next administration that will now have to take that hard decision. The third point to note is that the budget is an appropriation.
Right.
Okay? Whatever the president or the Minister of Finance presented, they are best proposals. And I think one of the senators made the point that, look, we're going to look at the proposals and we will make our own, decision. But at the end of the day, all of us will pay.
Right.
Nigerians generally, if the economy is not working, if there are no capital projects. After all, in paragraph 3 of his budget speech, the president listed a lot that the administration has done in terms of infrastructure and, contributions also of the Sovereign Investment Authority and all of that. What it will mean, if we take the option that the senators, some of them are recommending, will be that many of those projects will in fact have to be abandoned.
Right.
And in any case, we're still going to borrow a lot of money, whether we like it or not. You said you referred to polls twice. You want to know polls? Yes, it's a good idea. I have no problems with that. But this is a political season. It means that all the polling agencies are more interested in predicting, political fortunes rather than thinking about, basic issues of survival that you and I may be more concerned about.
Okay, so two things. The airline stats that you said, I think it just stares at us in the face. And we should not be sentimental when we see the facts. We should tackle it head on. Lagos should be attracting more traffic because it's got potential, but Lagos is not utilizing this potential. What Lagos is not doing is, number one, it's not selling itself enough. There are stories, copious notes in the 70s and 80s, how Canadians used to go buy ads on American TV stations to sell Canada as a holiday destination. And it worked over the years. I've not seen Lagos selling big on international media, the tourism potential, because they are there. And it's not only about insecurity, because there are places that people go that there's massive insecurity. It's crazy out there in Jamaica, but people go to Jamaica. They go to Negril. They go to other places like that. So it depends on how you sell. And I think the model Lagos should adopt is the South African model. See how South Africa has been able to sell themselves through the tourism board. Also, they made it a films destination. And they also incorporated with airlines to get special ticket packages. I think another problem is the fact that airline tickets into Lagos are nebulous. The pricing system, there's a level of incoherence there. And that's why you see that the airline price, London to Lagos, abysmally high compared to other African countries like, Cote d'Ivoire, Accra, Cote d'Ivoire and the likes that are getting very high, what is it called? So I think if we unlock in such a way that we can also get more players into the system, support local players, get more low-cost players into the system, there's this low cost, I think it's valuing or something that goes out of Senegal. You'll be thrilled. You can get like their cheap ticket out of Senegal to Europe. If we can get more of those players in here, put the system, then put all the things in place, the training and the infrastructure, tourism will boom. It's got potential. But we are not selling hard enough. Consistently, like the South Africans started making an intentional effort to sell. If we sell hard enough in the next 5-10 years, we could tip those numbers up. I mean, look at places like Luanda and, you will know that they are selling.
Luanda is in the top 10.
It's in the top 10. But also look at the market it's selling to Portugal. So you will know that there's also tourism potential. There's also business. There's also petrodollar that is being looked for across board. That's why the selling is going on. So I think if Lagos activates these things, it is not the time to be sentimental about that, but take it head on and take the feedback. Then you can start to change the dynamics. Secondly, about subsidies, it is incumbent on us to have a pathway to removing it once and for all. Because you see, what you spend on subsidy year in, year out is a waste. I fill my tank, 50 liters. I burn it in a week or two. It's gone forever. But I build schools. I build teachers. I train them. I build healthcare center. You know what I've done? I've invested in the future. That's the argument for subsidies. We can't keep it on. The new government that they are saying will come in, it will be their first litmus test. And
like
the government,
Ruto in Kenya.
And the government is to solve problems. So it's not for us to be thinking and saying, no, because you see, there's never going to be a right time to pull it out. And I go back to Goodluck Jonathan.
2012.
He waited for a while. When the indices were good and he pulled it out, didn't these same people come out to talk?
Indeed.
People will always talk, but the course of history will always move on. Any president that has the temerity and the strength to pull out subsidies will be respected as somebody that changed the course of history for Nigeria, because this money will be put into better use. And that's the kind of country we want. And those are the arguments we should make, not the sentiment of, if the government comes, going to have a hard time.
They will be attacked.
Government is there to ride through crisis. Don't make a crisis go to waste. It is in crisis you know a true leader.